Good afternoon. We will be starting the October PMR in a couple of minutes. If everyone could please take your seats, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. Good afternoon. I am excited to welcome all of you here that are in our auditorium at Census headquarters, and for those of you who are joining us online, welcome to our October 2018 Quarterly 2020 Census Program Management Review. We are looking forward to sharing the progress on our program with you over the next few hours, but first let me begin with our usual housekeeping items. Please remember that our program management review is being webcast live, so consider all mics live at all times. At the end of each presentation, we will have a question and answer period. When asking a question, please share your name, affiliation, and speak directly into your mic, so our friends online will be able to hear you as well. Kyle Wilcoxon from the Mobile and Multimedia Branch in the Telecommunications Office will now say a few words regarding the tablets and other technical advice. Kyle?
Thank you, Al. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle, and I'll be giving you a brief demonstration on how to use your iPads for today's PMR, and also providing instructions on connecting to the guest wireless. All right, so if you could please bring the iPads to the home screen by selecting the home button, which is located on the right side of the iPad in the middle. So when you're at the home screen, you'll see two applications on the bottom. The first application is Moz 360. All right, so if you tap that, this application is used to view the agenda and presentations for today's PMR. The documents will be on the left side of the screen. So if you select the presentation, it'll appear on the right side. If you want to expand the view, there is an X in the top middle of the screen. So if you tap that, it'll expand the view. When you're ready to go back, you will select Docs in the top left-hand side. Right, so if you go back to the home screen, the next application is Safari. And this application will allow you to browse the web for anything you may need. All right, so in front of you, you have little 10 cards that are displaying the guest wireless credentials. If you want to connect a personal device to the guest wireless, go to your Wi-Fi settings and connect to the System 10 account. All right, once connected, if you go to your preferred web browser and you try to access any website, you will then be prompted to enter the credentials on the 10 cards. All right, and once you enter the credentials, you'll have internet access. All right, so if you have any questions throughout the PMR in regards to the iPads or the guest wireless, myself and other colleagues will be here to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. If you're joining us online and you have a question, send an email to 2020.census.pmr@census.gov. Let me say that again, 2020.census.pmr@census.gov. Molly Shea, our Assistant Division Chief of Acquisitions, will now say a few words to remind our staff of the legal obligations when speaking with contractors. Molly?
I wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone that everything that is said that is part of the briefings and updates today is publicly available information. However, please exercise due diligence during breaks and when having discussions outside of the briefing to only discuss what is publicly available. For example, if you are a contractor, please do not comment about another contractor's performance to another contractor, things like that. Or if you are a government representative, do not share procurement-sensitive information or comment on a contractor's performance. Anything that is publicly available, including anything that is talked about in the briefings today, again, anything that is already out in the public, we can talk about. But anything that is sensitive, including information related to an acquisition that is ongoing or related to performance under a contract, please do not discuss. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Molly. If you're from the media, we've asked that you sign in and hope that you have done so. There's a designated area for you to sit with staff from the Census Bureau's Public Information Office. They're here to help you if you have a question or would like to arrange an interview with any of the 2020 Census leadership staff. Naomi Evangelista, Chief of the Media Relations Branch in the Public Information Office, is with us this afternoon. Naomi, may I ask you and your staff to stand so you can be easily identified? They're standing back by the back of the room for those who need to know where they are. Thank you very much. A few last reminders. The location of the restroom is outside the auditorium, down the hallway, and next to the green elevators. Lastly, in case of an emergency, please listen to the PA system, and if required, we will exit the building using the emergency exits that you see around this room. I failed to start off and say, for those of you who don't know me, that I am Al Fontenot. I'm the Associate Director of Decennial Census Programs. This afternoon, I will be providing you with some high-level program updates, beginning by highlighting some of our notable field operational successes from the 2018 test and transitioning into a progress report on early 2020 operations and key activities. I will be followed by Audrey Kaluri, the Chief of our Decennial IT Division, with a briefing on the key lessons learned and actions that are underway to incorporate those lessons as we refine and further test our systems to ensure that we are appropriately scaled, secure from both internal and external cyber threats, and that we're prepared to effectively execute the 2020 census. Our special topics today will begin with Mary Ann Chapin's presentation on how efforts related to the hard to count, hard to locate, hard to interview, and hard to contact, and hard to persuade are woven throughout our entire design of the 2020 census. She will highlight various operations and activities across the operational design that we undertake to ensure a complete and accurate count. We'll then take a 15-minute break before hearing from our senior computer scientist, Dr. Simpson Garfinkel, about the 2020 Census Disclosure Avoidance System. This is the system which helps to ensure that we protect respondent confidentiality and ensure that confidentiality is maintained in our scheduled publications. Our last special topic will be presented by Tim Kennel, who will give an overview of the post-enumeration survey. In 2010, some of you may recall, this was called Census Coverage Measurement. This program measures the coverage of the people and housing units in the decennial census and provides an estimate of net coverage error. The results of the post-enumeration survey will help us understand the extent to which the 2020 census counted everyone once, and in the right place. That being said, the success of the 2020 census really rests on the collective talents of the team working on the program, both within the Decennial Directorate and across the Census Bureau. So before we get into the presentations, I would like to keep with the tradition of recognizing the dedication to public service of recent retirees from the Decennial Census Leadership Team. Leslie Goodwin retired after 31 years of service. She had served as Chief of the Contract Management Office. Let's give her a round of applause for her remarkable record of dedicated public service. We also have some recent promotions and transfers that took place within the Decennial Directorate. In the Decennial Statistical Studies Division, Joan Hill has joined us as Assistant Chief for Experiments and Evaluations. Joan joined us from the Office of Survey and Census Analytics in the Field Directorate. If I call your name and you are here in the room, please stand to be recognized at that time. I do not believe Joan is with us this afternoon. We also have some recent promotions and transfers that took place within the Decennial Directorate. In the Decennial Contract Execution Office, Curtis Allen has joined as section leader for the fingerprinting within the C# project. He joined us from the Human Resources Division, where he was on the investigative staff. In the Decennial Census Management Division, Paul Crutch is now Deputy Chief Decennial Program Management. He previously worked in the SEDCAP Program Management Office. Paul, I thought I saw Paul. Yeah, thank you, Paul. Also in DCMD, in our Island Areas program, we have a series of new appointments. Tom File is now the Census Advisor to American Samoa. Tom recently served as a Special Assistant and Senior Sociologist in the Social Characteristics area. He will be in attendance. Yeah, Tom, there you are, standing right in the back. I think our Island Area folks will be back together there, so if you look around, you'll be able to see them all at once. Colleen Joyce is now the Senior Advisor to the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana. She joins the team having recently served as the Assistant Chief of the Census Redistricting and Voting Rights Data Office. Thank you, Colleen. Terry Long is now the Census Advisor to Guam. She joins the team having recently served as Special Assistant to DCMD Deputy Division Chief and the ADC for Content Translation, Puerto Rico, and Island Area Operations. Terry? Tomas Encarnacion is now the Census Advisor to St. Thomas of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Tomas joins the team, having recently served as the Chief of the Data Dissemination and Training Branch in Clemso. He's here. Yeah, there you are. Tomas, how are you? Dan Doyle is the Census Advisor to St. Thomas of the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have two Census Advisors there in the Virgin Islands. I jokingly said to them before that I was talking to my wife about really wanting one of their jobs and spend the rest of my census in St. Thomas. It sounded like a great way to go, but it will be an opportunity. Dan is coming to us having served as Assistant Survey Director in the Demographic Directorate. We are delighted to have them all join the team. Congratulations on your recent promotions. We have one individual who's leaving the Decennial Directorate. Ian Hall, who you may recall spoke to you in several PMRs on address canvassing, update leave, when he was Assistant Division Chief in DCMD. He has left our directorate, but he's staying on the 2020 Census program. He's moving over to the Field Directorate as the Deputy Regional Director in the New York region. While we truly miss his work ethic, we are happy to have him in the New York region. They have substantially acquired someone who will make a major difference in helping lead their performance in the census. Although I believe Ian is at home packing right now for his move, he's probably watching the PMR online, so let's give him a well-deserved round of applause. Thank you very much. Now let us turn to some of the key program updates. I show this slide to give you a good snapshot of where we are with our major key milestones on the road to 2020. As you can see from the highlighted row, it shows that we have conducted the 2018 end-to-end census test. Now, while there are still future deliverables from this test, namely producing a prototype of the geographic and data products, we have successfully completed the peak operations phase of data collection. Slide. Thank you. The big takeaway from the 2018 census test is all of our systems deployed and integrated effectively. More than half of all households, 52.3%, responded to the test on their own without the motivation of an advertising campaign. This number surpassed our goal for the test by 3 percentage points. In 2020, as in past censuses, we plan to have a strong advertising campaign using traditional media and a robust partnership program which will boost our self-response. But in 2020, we will also have real-time campaign optimization using social media and digital media to direct our media and increased partnership staff to the areas in which they will be most needed, and that we believe will have a strong impact on increasing our response rates. This strong combination will help us maximize self-response. We successfully deployed 3 modes of self-response: internet, phone, and paper. Those who did not respond on their own were then visited by one of the more than 700 census takers hired for the test. The test results showed that the Census Bureau was able to successfully automate processes for recruiting, hiring, training versus 2010, when we had paper applications, manual processes during which our staff had to set up testing sites, administer and manually grade paper exams, collect and transport the application and the evaluation material to the local census offices where they were manually input into our system. The test demonstrated that the field staff was able to securely submit work schedules and submit their daily payroll and expenses on a handheld instrument. In 2010, work assignments were manually given out by crew leaders at daily meetings at fast food restaurants or other locations, and that was a daily process. After that, their payroll was turned in on a daily basis on paper payroll forms to the crew leader, who had to deliver those forms daily to the office so clerks could manually key in the payroll. We were able to optimize routing of field staff assignments instead of each enumerator randomly driving non-optimized routes. We were able to deliver assignments electronically and collect completed electronic questionnaires in a way that kept them secure when on the instrument, secure in transmission, and secure when collected by the Census Bureau. The combination of route optimization, automation of assignments, and transmission of casework, the automation of payroll, combined with other system efficiencies, helped us increase our average productivity from 1.015 cases per hour to 1.5 cases per hour, a substantial increase in productivity. Here's our final summary snapshot of the self-response of housing units. In addition to what I just mentioned, this slide shows the response by mode. 6 in every 10 households who responded did so online, 61.2%. Close to a third, 31.3%, responded via paper, and the remainder, 7.5%, responded over the telephone. As a reminder, we had no online option in 2010 and very little opportunity for phone data collection. As a reminder, getting the slides to move. There you go. Well, actually, it skipped a slide. There we go. As a reminder, what you're looking at now was our self-response contact strategy for Providence. We had a 2-panel design. It was 70%, 30% split between internet first, which meant an invitation letter was sent on the first contact, and internet choice, a paper questionnaire, was sent on the first contact. For the 2020 census, the proportion will vary depending on the area. As you can imagine, the digital divide differs across the nation, and some areas will have a higher percentage of households that will receive paper questionnaires in that first mailing. In addition to the internet contact strategy, Providence had close to an 80-20 split between English mailings and bilingual mailings. That is to say, mail materials in English and Spanish. This proportion, again, will vary for the 2020 census depending on the demographics in the area. This graph shows the distribution between internet, paper, and phone responses across different groups. First off, our internet response surpassed our projections by 2 percentage points, 61% versus a plan of 59%. As you can see from the graph, our contact actual results aligned with our contact strategies. 70% of those who responded in the internet first group did so online. while only 34% of those who responded to the Internet Choice Group chose the Internet as their primary mode, responding primarily on paper. This distribution also varied between the group who received mailed materials in English and the group that received bilingual mail materials. Almost 2/3 of the respondents from the group that received mailed materials in English chose the Internet to respond. On the other hand, half of the respondents from the group that received bilingual mail materials chose to respond via paper. Now I'd like to highlight some of our operational successes from the test. We have had many, too many to fit on one slide. For address canvassing, we successfully implemented our 2020 Census address canvassing approach to listing using our listing and mapping application, LIMA. We successfully deployed a new independent quality control operation for in-field address canvassing and successfully realized a substantial increase field lister productivity from our initial plans. For mailing and printing, we successfully printed and distributed 3.2 million pieces of mail, successfully implemented a staggered mail strategy to multiple cohorts with conditional mailings to non-responding households. On the other hand, the other side of the coin, our print vendor declared Chapter 11, and we had to solicit new bids for our print contract. As we mentioned in the last PMR, we expect to award the new contract by November. That contract proposals are in the evaluation stage right now. They were all submitted and closed approximately 3 weeks ago, and they've been being evaluated. And so we're on track to award that contract in November. For update leave, we successfully implemented an approach to listing, leaving a census ID-linked form package at every housing unit using our LIMA application. We successfully merged non-responding household units into the non-response follow-up operational workload. And for self-response, as I mentioned earlier, we successfully deployed multiple modes of self-response: internet, paper, and telephone. Additionally, we successfully deployed an internet self-response data collection instrument in English and Spanish, successfully stood up a paper data capture operation in Jeffersonville, Indiana at our National Processing Center, integrating and utilizing new scanner technology. We successfully fielded questions via Census questionnaire assistance centers and offered respondents an opportunity to provide their responses to our customer service representatives. For the Census questionnaire assistance, try to say that 3 times, Census questionnaire assistance, we successfully built out, fitted, operated, and decommissioned call centers in Jacksonville, Florida, and Sandy, Utah. We successfully supported inbound calls for assistance and self-response, outbound calling for coverage improvement operation, and outbound calling for non-response follow-up interviews. We made the decision during the end of the 18 tests that we would not use outbound calling for non-response follow-up re-interview in 2020. The number of calls you had to make for the response that you got was just not worth the lift. We learned that also when we had ACS, which did an outbound calling operation, a caddy operation, which about 1.5 years ago, we closed out the caddy. People don't answer unknown phone numbers as much as they once did. And so we had to be very sensitive to how we manage that. We have a field operation for follow-up for re-interview using the instrument, and we'll be utilizing that in our 2020 operation. We successfully supported calls in 9 languages: English, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, Arabic, Tagalog, Korean, and Vietnamese. For recruiting and hiring, we deployed and used the online job application and assessment for peak operations. We successfully recruited 2,027 applications in support of address canvassing and 3,060 applications in support of peak operations, update leave, non-response follow-up, and group quarters. As I previously mentioned, we were unable to recruit and hire as many people as our models indicated that we needed before the test. We deployed 735 enumerators to fill 70% of our model goal of 1,049. But the increase in productivity from 1.05 to 1.56 units per hour, more than offset the staff shortage. If we used the new productivity, it would have said we needed to deploy approximately 706 enumerators at the beginning of the operation. We actually deployed 735. But we're not going to depend solely on productivity increases to offset low unemployment numbers throughout the nation, and we need to encourage applicants in other ways. We're working closely with Y&R, our advertising agency, to develop campaigns focused on categories of people who are not necessarily only in the unemployed category, but are working jobs and situations that make them available evenings and weekends, which is when our higher availability of respondents occurs. We're using targeted advertising to reach teachers. If you have paid any attention to the news, teachers are complaining about needing to make more money. Teachers love to do the census. It's a great opportunity for them to partake in democracy and to be able to tell their students about what they do. So we're focusing on teachers. We're focusing on students. Students, it's a great opportunity to make a great hourly wage on a job that helps them learn what our democracy is all about and encourages them to perhaps stay with the Census Bureau after they graduate and come as a statistician or a math stat or some of the many areas that we have opportunities for them to work full-time and develop a career. We're also focusing on people in the non-formalized economy, Uber drivers, people who have opportunities to give part-time work to the census and continue in the main job that they are working. In addition, the director of the Office of Management and Budget sent a memo encouraging government agencies to allow dual employment waivers to have some of their employees also work for the 2020 census. Successful completion of our fingerprint collection and background check activity for all temporary field and office staff using new automated fingerprint solutions was another achievement in the 2018 test. For non-response follow-up, we successfully implemented a field data collection and enumeration application loaded onto iPhone 7s to conduct interviews. We successfully identified administrative records, occupied cases, and removed some cases from the workload after one NERFU contact attempt. For group quarters, we successfully demonstrated the integration of systems supporting a paper-based operation, successfully conducted the service-based enumeration using two methods, in-person interviews and paper listings. And we successfully demonstrated a variety of enumeration methods that can be utilized for group quarters enumeration. This slide gives you an idea of what we have left to do to move from the 2018 test to the 2020 census. The big thing, of course, being performance and scalability across all systems. Autry will be talking about that a little later. We will also add additional languages to the Internet Self-Response Instrument to fully expand it to 13 languages as planned. We'll do the same thing for the Census Questionnaire Assistance Centers and expand from the 8 languages offered during the test to 13 languages in addition to English. Other highlights include opening a second paper data capture center, giving us 2 centers, one east, one west, which gives us instant scale-up capability if we get more paper than we expected. We can operate one shift in each location based on the current forecast, but by adding shifts, we could accommodate a much higher load of paper. And most importantly, we have to select a print vendor to handle the paper printing requirements for the 2020 census. For our non-response follow-up work remaining, we still have a mapping application, new work availability functionality, and just to re-explain that, if you don't remember, work availability is when a worker puts in the hours that they will be available so we can match it up with the workload and the best opportunities to do the interviewing in their geography. We have additional reports that will help us monitor the operations, and we have some adaptations and updates to accommodate Puerto Rican-style addresses. And we'll be refining closeout execution plan. And our closeout is the last stage of the census, when we're out in the field getting those hard-to-count last resisting areas. We've developed a plan that has basically 3 steps in the way we go through the NORFU operation. The first step will be utilizing the optimizer at its full capacity. What we have learned is the optimizer is the most effective in a target-rich environment. By a target-rich environment, I mean full field of potential cases and a full field of workers to be able to work them. We maximize our savings at that mode. The next mode will be utilizing the optimizer a little bit more, but we will be sticking cases to enumerators, so they will own cases more. The optimizer reflushes every night to get to the best set of people for the right case. We'll start to pull that functionality back in the second mode, so we will be saying you get to own that case to get that case completed. And then the third mode will be working at a much higher level to move our best enumerators to our toughest areas, even if they have to drive a little farther than they normally would, so we can get the best people closing out the operation. As for group quarters, we plan to expand our advanced contact approach to account for GQs that cannot be contacted during the period that we have selected for advanced contact. We also plan to refine the contact strategy to encourage e-response and develop additional guidance for e-response letters to assist GQ administrators. Many of you may recognize our timeline slide.
Seem to have a delay.
I don't recognize it.
She pushes a button and then it takes a while to.
Yeah. Try again. Anyway, there we go. As we convert from testing and evaluation to plans for execution, we have a lot going on. In the next few slides, I will touch on the key activities highlighted here. LUCA is fully underway. More than 70%, 8,321 of the participating governments have sent their submissions in so far. This covers 95% of the population and 95% of the housing units in the nation. The response rate for the 2018 Boundary and Annexation Survey is close to 90%, surpassing the goal of reaching 85% response by the end of the fourth quarter. Of the 34,715 responding governments, 90% had no changes in boundaries to report. The annual Boundary Annexation Survey is used to update information about the legal boundaries and names of all governmental units. The redistricting data program staff are assisting the Geography Division with its final quality control of voting district boundary insertions into our master address file topological integrated geographic encoding and referencing MAF-Tiger system. It's easier to say MAF-Tiger. As a part of the phase 2 of the voting district project, the RDP staff are also testing geographic update partnership software, which we call GUPS, which will be sent to state partners in January 2019 to verify their voting district boundaries and submit new updates as needed. State-level complete count committees are underway with 38 states or state equivalents having formed 2020 Census Complete Count Committees and an additional 11 states considering to form committees. In addition to the state Complete Count commissions and committees, there's significant work being done to establish CCCs at the county and city level. Now, I'm going to keep talking while they're trying to get the slides in place. I don't know, can you see them on your screens? Because I don't see them on my monitor, and I don't see them on the bid board. You see them? Okay, good. Okay. Okay, we're caught up. We're on the right slide. I talked about the 38 states, or state equivalents, forming state complete count committees. I will want to make a comment. In 2010, we did not have officially a state-level complete count committee initiative. This was an initiative started up getting ready for the 2020 census, and therefore we are building at that level. But at the lower level, 468 local complete count committees have already been established nationwide. This includes 37 tribal complete count committees. 3,619 organizations have been contacted via our local partnership specialists, and we have already completed 4,855 awareness and education events to make people in the local community aware that the census is coming. And they are partners in participation with us in completing an effective census. We're on track to meeting the goal of hiring 1,500 partnership specialists by June 30th, 2019. These partnership specialists will work out of the 6 regional census centers, and the RCCs have already hired 172 partnership specialists with a December 1st goal of having 176 hired. So they are well on their way to completing that. They also have 35 in the pipeline awaiting clearance, in addition to the 172 that have been hired. The 2020 Census National Partnership Program has identified 453 what they call Keystone Partners. A Keystone Partner is an initial group of national organizations being approached to support the 2020 census. So far, 83 of these organizations have agreed to become national partners, including some high-profile organizations like Facebook and Google. An additional 99 organizations have expressed interest in participating in our National Partnership Program. Just to give you an overview, we have a Community Engagement Partnership Program which is on the ground in the neighborhoods, in the regions, and we have a National Partnership Program which works with large corporations and large entities that span across state borders, municipal borders, who can combine together with our Community Partnership Program to give us the most effective coverage and most effective reach. The Census Barriers, Attitudes, and Motivation Survey, CBAMS, is complete and the data are being analyzed. We're working with our contracting team to begin development for the media plans, messaging, and creative treatments. Census staff are currently finalizing the review of proposals for the creative media, web, and digital partnerships and the Statistics in Schools program. The field recruitment webpage went live on September 4th, allowing the public to review and apply for positions in the 6 regional census centers and in the 40 early opening census area offices. This will get applicants into our hiring pool for the address canvassing listing operations. Just so you realize, address canvassing is less than a year away. We start address canvassing on August 19th, 2019. This is an interesting thing. With no major promotion, no major conversation, as of yesterday, we had 41,000 applicants who had created a profile in our hiring assessment application, and over 33,000 of those have made it through taking and completing the assessment, filling out their form, and have been entered into our decennial applicant personnel payroll system, meaning they're eligible to be selected. I was told last night we've just opened a soft start to see if we can start to select, take out the bugs. And we have the first 2 recruiting assistants were selected this week. They successfully went through fingerprinting today, and they moved through the operation to check. So as a soft start, we've moved some people all the way through that process. So we're kind of excited about that, even though we're a long way from finishing with just 2.
And no bugs.
And no bugs. Thank you. And absolutely no bugs. They moved through smoothly. Through refinements to the application and reduced numbers of questions in the assessment, the average time to complete the application and the assessment is down to less than 10 minutes per person. That compares to 40 minutes during the 2018 test. Also, the instructions have been clarified. The built-in commands have been made simpler, and we've only had 5% of the applicants needing to call the help desk versus 18% during the 2018 test. We continue to be challenged with the process of executing leases for our area census offices. Lease awards have been granted to all 40 Wave 1 ACOs, and all 40 have completed design intent drawings and complete construction drawings. They're scheduled to open between January and March of 2019. The 208 Wave 2 offices were scheduled to have had leases awarded by October 15th and to open between June and September 2019. All 208 have space identified, but as of October 15th, 171 of the Wave 2 ACOs, that's 82%, had occupancy agreements signed, and of those, 75% or 157 have leases awarded. So far, 46 of the Wave 2 ACOs have complete design intent drawings and 8 have completed construction drawings. We are clearly behind on our process of getting the ACOs prepared, leased, and ready to open. We're working closely with GSA, who's our partner in this enterprise, to close the gap as quickly as possible. There are several contingencies that would be in place if we continue to run behind. Number one, some of the staff can start working in the RCCs, which are currently operating, and covering those areas if their offices are not ready to open. We don't want to have to go to that. We could use double staff in parallel offices, in offices in similar geographies that are close together. We don't want to have to go to that. We could hotel these people in a third-party location. We don't want to go to that. But my main point is we have ways to ensure that it does not stop our progress toward executing the census. So those 208 offices that are not part of address canvassing that are scheduled to open in 19 will be functional one way or the other before we get into peak operations for 2020. You've seen our contract slide before. It shows the major contracts we have in place to support the 2020 census. All but one of our major contracts are awarded and in the contract administration phase. As I mentioned before, we still have to select a print vendor. The contract is in the stage where the submissions are being awarded, and we work closely with the Government Publishing Office, who is responsible for procurement of all government printing. So they are the primary who's working with the contract, and we're working with them to ensure that the Census Bureau's interests are high on their radar. Our contracts are monitored and corrected when necessary to ensure the contracts are meeting their performance objectives for the 2018 end-to-end census test and for the 2020 census. The one thing I would like to mention is public information, so I can mention it. Our CQA vendor, GDIT, has sold or is in the process of selling their telephone data collection operations to another provider of those services. And Maximus Incorporated has agreed to buy those operations. Maximus currently provides those same services for a number of large government entities, and they are a publicly traded company. They look financially solid. I've had one casual meeting with some of their people, and they are really interested in jumping on, taking over the contract, and executing to the same standards and requirements that GDIT was executing. But GDIT has exited that set of businesses out of their business portfolio. At this point, I'm going to open the floor for questions before I turn it over to Autry Kaluri, who has many updates to share with you about our 2020 systems readiness. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Autry?
Thank you, Al. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to give you all an update on systems readiness for the remaining operations of the 18 test and also for 2020 census. As you all know, we have completed a majority of the 24 planned operations for the 18 end-to-end census test successfully, which means that we have built and released systems in support of those operations successfully. Currently, the systems for response processing are operating in production, and systems in support of data products and dissemination and redistricting data operations are on track to be released per schedule. We learned valuable lessons out of the 18 tests from a systems perspective as well, and I'll present some of those key lessons learned along with actions we are taking in response to those lessons. I'll then switch gears and give an update on the operational deliveries for the 2020 census and the status of systems, including the set cap systems that are part of each of those operational deliveries. For the 18 tasks, there is one main release left, the tabulation, product creation, and dissemination release with conduct operation date of January 7, 2019. We went live with 8 systems supporting the response processing release as of October 1. Response processing, as you may recall, includes deduplication of responses through a primary selection algorithm, quality assessment of data, and creation of census unedited file, or the CUF as we call it. The last release includes creation of census edited file, the CEF, processing the response data through the disclosure avoidance system, creation of the microdata detail file, tabulation, and also the creation of demonstration products for dissemination, the public law 94-171 redistricting data products. This last release involves 11 systems, and we are on track to release those systems per schedule. This slide shows the key systems supporting the response processing, tabulation, product creation, and dissemination releases. The self-response quality assurance system, SRQA, formerly, as you probably remember, known as fraud detection system, is operational. It was deployed into production and successfully executed an initial production data run. The full 18 census test data set will be run through the SRQA system after census red team testing is complete. As mentioned before in the last PMR, if you recall, red team testing is where a separate group purposely inserts fraudulent responses in a copy of the 18 data in order to test the SRQA system's ability to identify fraudulent responses. PERSYS, the production environment for administrative records staging, integration, and storage, is supporting the SRQA system as well as other systems in relation to the processing of response data. Specifically, PERSYS is providing address person pairing or matching and delivering to SRQA system in support of the ongoing self-response quality assurance. Results of the matching will be evaluated, and matching algorithm will be enhanced as needed to support the 2020 census. You'll hear about disclosure avoidance later. The decennial response processing system incorporates the component of disclosure avoidance and plays a critical role in the response data processing. While a majority of the systems, such as cards and CDL, for the last remaining release are a redeployment, the tabulation and set size systems will be released for the first time. The set size system implements the enterprise data dissemination environment. The test readiness review date for this last release is October 31, end of this month. The conduct operation, as shown earlier, is January 7th. This slide, I've already shown this in the last PMR. I wanted to re-show this because it summarizes the key functions that are supported by systems as part of the 18 end-to-end census tests. The 2 key functions of tabulation and dissemination are remaining. One activity that we completed since the last PMR is the group quarters enumeration in the field. We are continuing to use the commercial cloud solution along with our data center, and the network and security operations centers are operational, supporting production activities. We also work closely with our Office of Information Security to ensure that we implement up-to-date security protocols and address any compliance issues before we release any system to production with an authority to operate. We have taken the 18 test seriously and continue to take it seriously, and have incorporated all necessary measures to maintain the confidentiality and privacy of the respondent data. We deployed 42 of 44 systems in support of operations so far. The tabulation and set size systems are the 2 remaining. We made a lot of progress with respect to development and deployment of systems in support of the 18 tests, and we also learned valuable lessons. Let us now go over some of those key lessons. The lessons learned so far can be categorized under 4 buckets: data integration, case and transaction accounting, project level and integration testing, and verification of systems for training and production operations startup. For the first bucket, examples of types of data integration issues include data items specified to be transmitted between systems that were not, transmitted data items that did not conform to expected format or values, or data item values that were not transmitted correctly. Specific examples I can quote here: handling of special characters such as the ampersand and apostrophe. Some systems were not able to process multi-byte UTF-8 characters. The message size for some messages exceeded the limit that the service-oriented architecture's enterprise service bus system had set for systems. The second bucket, case and transaction accounting examples, some basic collection units, I think most of you are familiar with it, were worked twice in the in-field address canvassing operation. Some categories of update leave cases were not forwarded to the NORFU operation. These situations often required manual intervention to resolve. The third bucket, project level and integration testing examples, the line break characters in some response cases were preventing processing of the cases. We had an issue with attaching an image to the time and expense submission when using a browser on an iPad. We could have avoided these types of production issues with more robust testing that tested all scenarios of the operational design and tested the exception paths. Testing needs to exercise all possible paths that respondent cases can take based on the operational design of the 2020 census. Now for the final bucket, verification of systems for training and production operations startup, an important lesson learned is that additional preparations need to be conducted to ensure that key field operations trainings execute smoothly, and that large-scale production operations involving respondents, field representatives, or call center agents need to be verified as functional in the production environment before the actual start of the operation or the full launch of the operation. Some examples of those issues: NORFU enumerator accounts that had been created more than 30 days earlier were made disabled, and the affected enumerator trainees could not log into the field operational control system. Individuals rehired to be the NORFU enumerators did not have their account set with the default password at training. So these types of issues, as you can see, must definitely be resolved. So what are we doing to address these in our preparation for the 2020 census? Next slide. In relation to the data integration issues between systems, we have developed and are executing a plan to achieve data lineage for key data categories and operations. Data lineage documents the life cycle of data items from creation through maintenance to use. Priority areas with data lineage, where data lineage is needed, are response data, paradata, and address data. We expanded the areas where the scope of the interface control working group to apply additional checks that focus on data lineage. And we also established a data lineage team consisting of data architects, testers, engineers, and subject matter experts. Automated tools have been developed by our SetCap program that detect data definition inconsistencies between the census metadata repository and the system interface designs. Now regarding the second bucket, will verify that all transactions between systems are accounted for and that all census cases are accounted for within the operational design. This verification will be through software or the service-oriented architecture's enterprise service bus dashboard, which will be utilized to monitor for transactions that did not process successfully. The third bucket, through the expansion of framework of the testing program, we have added test phases, user acceptance testing and customer acceptance testing prior to program level testing will provide stakeholders the opportunity to see the behavior of systems under non-normative paths and a variety of operational scenarios. Operational test dry runs will provide stakeholders the opportunity to execute scenarios that cross systems and operations to verify that the integrity of the response data is maintained and to verify that operational reports accurately reflect the processing of the cases. A new system test environment we are implementing will provide the opportunity for systems development teams to test system-to-system interfaces prior to delivery of the 2020 census program. Finally, regarding the mitigation plans to address the fourth bucket under lessons learned, we are building soft launches. Already Al mentioned this. The soft launches, where in the schedule for every significant 2020 census operation involving respondents, field representatives, or call center agents. A soft launch is a small-scale execution of production cases by production users. The execution of soft launch cases is closely monitored by headquarters subject matter experts, and the results are verified by IT specialists. We also established a working group with the help of the technical integrator that will focus on verification of system readiness, specifically for the training sessions. Next slide. Let me now talk about the operational deliveries for the 2020 census. As we mentioned during the last PMR, based on lessons learned during the 18 tests, we converted the original 4 releases we planned for 2020 census into 16 operational deliveries of systems, including an operational delivery each for island areas and post-enumeration survey. The furnished table on the screen shows the 16 operational deliveries and the associated test and production readiness review dates, along with the conduct operation dates. Also, as you can see, the operational deliveries are operations focused. In fact, each operational delivery is named as and associated with the relevant operation or operations it supports. We have also developed the mapping between the operational deliveries and systems, basically identifying which systems will be supporting each operational delivery. The status of each of the systems in terms of its readiness to support the operation will be assessed and published regularly, just as we did for the 18 end-to-end census tests. And the system schedule will be part of the integrated master schedule for the 2020 census. In order for us to get the true picture of readiness for conducting an operation, remember, operational readiness is more than the system's readiness and encompasses contracts, hiring, training, budgets, devices, field equipment and infrastructure, etc. So we created teams of 4, a team of 4 representing each operational delivery. The team consists of a subject matter expert representing the operation from Decennial Census Management Division, an operations manager or readiness lead again from Decennial Census Management Division, a representative from Field Division as applicable based on the operation, and a release manager from the technical integrator. The team of 4 will lead the effort to establish initial baselines to ensure all stakeholders agree upon the operational delivery scope, along with the work and timeline required to implement it. They'll then manage to the baseline and comprehensively assess impact when something needs to change or is late. As you can see from the table, the operational delivery in support of the 2020 census early ops preparation had the test readiness review on July 23rd of this year and had a PRR on 10/17. Let me give more information on this operational delivery. For Census early operations preparation, we had two specific needs: systems to support early ops recruiting and systems to support selection, hiring, and training. For early ops recruiting, 9 systems shown on the top row went into production on 9/4. 11 more systems will go into production on October 23rd. Those systems are shown in the second row. What I'm demonstrating here is that although the go-live date for the first of the 16 operational deliveries is October 23rd, systems were released in advance of that date. This is true with some of the other operational deliveries as well. I'd like for you all to note a system name change. The system, which used to be called as Mojo Recruiting Dashboard, has been renamed as Mojo Field Processing System. It's highlighted in blue, since there are multiple components that make up that system. The dashboard being one of them, but also the browse living quarters capability, the solution that manages what we call as dangerous addresses, and another solution that provides performance and progress reports for field operations. This slide shows the remaining key work, again, IT-oriented, with respect to systems readiness for the 2020 census. We're making good progress with each of the identified buckets. The Delta functionality is being implemented by system teams as we speak, and the systems then go through a thorough integration testing. We're paying close attention to the performance and scalability testing. Based on the results of the integration, performance, and scalability testing, we'll finalize the cloud deployment architecture, taking into consideration the needed security-related hardening and dynamic provisioning as appropriate. We're also managing the scheduled deployment of equipment in the field offices. Now, talking about security, I'm sure most of you know that this month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. While there are continued efforts from our Office of Information Security to educate our employees on cybersecurity threats and how to be cyber secure at work, we are also working with federal partners to test our systems, stay ahead of cyber threats, and enhance our incident response capabilities. On September 26th, in this auditorium, more than 100 people from across the Census Bureau took part in a half-day exercise facilitated by the Department of Homeland Security to assess our ability to respond to simulated scenarios that could happen during the 2020 census. This exercise gave us an opportunity to assess our processes and procedures, as well as our organizational coordination and communication. As we look forward, we are preparing to conduct additional tabletop readiness exercises, as well as systems testing to ensure the overall security of our systems and readiness to respond to any potential incident. We're also making good progress in implementing multi-factor authentication for our listing and mapping, mobile case management, and enumeration devices. The solution will have 2 factors for authentication. Let me now give more information on performance and scalability testing. Shown on this slide is the timeline in relation to the performance and scalability framework. As you may recall, there are 4 phases of performance and scalability testing, and the diagram gives you the high-level information on each phase. All systems go through phase 1, and determination is then made as to which of the systems need to continue with the remaining phases. We have shown the environments where the testing will happen, either it be the dev, staging, or production environments. Also shown are the key milestone dates. What I would like to highlight here is that phases 1 and 2 must be completed by the test readiness review date, and phases 3 and 4, as applicable, must be completed by the production readiness review date. That's how the performance and scalability testing is integrated into the overall progress monitoring of each system as managed in the integrated master schedule. One note, we have also provided in the backup slides that most of you will see on the website. For those that are actually interested in knowing what the systems list is, we have provided a list that contains full name of each of the 52 systems and a description that goes with it. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Autry. Any questions for Autry? Ty?
Yeah, thank you, Autry. The soft launch is 2 questions. Will we see new activities on the master activity schedule to reflect the soft launch dates?
Typically, these are conducted a few days before the go-live date, and we have already published the production readiness and the go-live dates. So we could identify, if possible, those dates.
I was just going to say, we'd like to keep those flexible because they're actually pre-production dates, and so we want to have a little bit of leeway around those few days to do that soft launch. But generally, you'll know it's going to be within 4 or 5 days of production day.
Before we go live.
Okay, I think that takes care of the second question, because the other one was if they are, I was just curious if they were new. I mean, we brought them forward. That didn't affect the actual hard dates that you had planned already.
Correct. They're always before.
They're
always
aspirational things to hit in advance of what you've already
Correct.
committed to. Got it. Thank you.
This is our attempt to find things with only 3 or 4, 5, 10 users as opposed to 10,000 users.
Any other questions?
If there are no further questions for Autry, Mary Ann?
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ann Chapin, and I'm pleased to be here today to share a look at the 2020 Census operational design from a different perspective. In this presentation, we will highlight various operations and activities across the operational design that are undertaken for hard-to-count populations. The presentation will not be an exhaustive list of all of the activities that support hard-to-count populations, but it will provide a high-level perspective on how efforts related to the hard-to-count are woven throughout our entire design. And before proceeding, I would like to acknowledge that this presentation is the result of the knowledge and contributions of subject matter experts from across the 2020 program, and I want to thank them for all of their contributions. To start the presentation, we'll review a few slides that you have undoubtedly seen before. First, why do we conduct a census? The purpose of the 2020 census is to conduct a complete count of population and housing and to disseminate the results to the President, the states, and the American people. As mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, we must conduct a census every 10 years for the primary purpose of apportioning seats to the states in the House of Representatives. Data collected during a decennial census are used for many other purposes as well, including drawing congressional and state legislative districts, school districts, voting precincts, enforcing voting rights and civil rights legislation, distributing federal dollars to states, over $675 billion annually, informing federal, tribal, state, and local government planning decisions, informing business and nonprofit decisions, and providing a population benchmark for nearly every other United States survey. Our primary goal for the 2020 census is a complete and accurate count of population and housing, counting everyone once, only once, and in the right place. The country's environment, which includes changing technology, a mobile population, and complex living arrangements, influences our ability to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. The 2020 census will be conducted in a rapidly changing world, requiring continual improvement on our part. It is harder and more expensive to enumerate the population. Decade after decade, we must devote additional thought and effort to understanding our environment and the potential impacts on counting the population, along with who the hard-to-count populations have been, continue to be, and are becoming. Some persons or groups require special or extra effort to ensure their representation in the 2020 census. These are the hard to count. To a certain extent, any deviations taken from the traditional or the ideal response and enumeration path can be seen as an effort to encourage response and participation from someone who might not otherwise respond to and be counted as part of the 2020 decennial census. With our operational design for the 2020 census, our ideal path for census response involves delivery of an invitation letter containing a unique census identification code, a respondent taking that letter and code, sitting down at a computer or similar device, and completing and submitting their census response. But our world is not ideal for everyone. Each of us may have our own definition, our own perspective, our own passions for certain population groups that are hard to count. So let's frame the conversation around hard to count populations. The information depicted on this slide is based on the work of Roger Tarangio and built on by Nancy Bates and others. Tarangio defined the hard to count in 4 categories: hard to locate, hard to contact, hard to persuade, and hard to interview. The hard to locate can include house units that we do not have in our frame or persons wanting to remain hidden. The hard to contact can include highly mobile populations, people experiencing homelessness, and populations with physical access barriers, such as gated communities. The hard to persuade can include populations with low civic engagement and populations suspicious of government. And the hard to interview can include populations with participation or where participation may be hindered by language barriers, low literacy, or lack of internet access. Some populations may fall in one, more than one, or all of these categories. So now we'll take a look at some hard to count populations. While this is not an exhaustive list of the hard to count, we should acknowledge groups that have been historically hard to count. This list was developed in cooperation with a National Advisory Committee working group established specifically to look at aspects of the 2020 census design and hard to count populations. Hard to count populations include young children, highly mobile persons, racial and ethnic minorities, non-English speakers, low-income persons, persons experiencing homelessness, undocumented immigrants, persons who distrust the government, LGBTQ persons, persons with mental or physical disabilities, and persons who do not live in traditional housing. Other groups not listed could include college students, the military, and persons living in buildings requiring special access. Shown on this slide is our 2020 Census operational placemat. As mentioned earlier, our efforts to consider, plan for, and ultimately enumerate hard-to-count populations is woven through our entire operational design. Highlighted in purple are those operations making the most significant contributions to supporting an integrated design for the hard-to-count. Other operations not highlighted may also support our efforts to enumerate the hard-to-count, but to a lesser extent. For example, systems engineering and integration provides the systems, software, and applications used to collect our census response data. Over the next few slides, we'll touch on each of these operations highlighted in purple and share a high-level look at how each supports hard-to-count populations. We learn from every census. The Census Bureau's ability to connect with the population as a whole and to have the population connect with the data collected provides opportunities for hard-to-count populations to understand the importance of the census and to see themselves in the data that are collected. Nested within our program management operation are efforts on stakeholder communication and engagement. The Census Bureau engages with various internal audiences, external audiences, and stakeholders pertaining to our planning, research, and operational design. We engage early and on a regular basis to share our plans, but more importantly, to listen, to hear, to understand, and to collect information on the opportunities and challenges with groups that have historically been hard to count, as well as groups that are emerging as hard to count. Our efforts around stakeholder communication and engagement include forums such as these program management reviews, regular engagements with our National Advisory Committee and our Census Scientific Advisory Committee, congressional briefings, and tribal consultations, which proved invaluable in collecting input and advice on preferred enumeration methods. When we consider the hard-to-count framework, stakeholder communication and engagement focuses on all 4 segments: hard to locate, hard to contact, hard to persuade, and hard to interview. An integral component to the 2020 Census operational design is our Integrated Partnership and Communication Program, which must reach every household in the nation, delivering the right messages to the right audiences at the right time, such that we educate, increase awareness, and inspire our population to respond to the census. There are many components to the Integrated Partnership and Communication operation that focus on the hard to count, hard to persuade, and hard to interview populations. The Integrated Partnership and Communications will offer statistics in schools, which can support early efforts to educate about the Census Bureau and the value of the census, particularly schools in hard to count areas. It also includes digital media, social media, paid advertising, earned media, rapid response, and the partnership program, which includes national partners, local partners, and complete count commissions. The Census Bureau relies on the support of partners throughout the country to help perform a complete and accurate count. We work together with our partners to extend our outreach efforts and connect to hard-to-count populations. Recently, I heard someone say that we need to make the invisible visible. Content informs design. You may think, how does content informs design support an accurate enumeration of our hard-to-count populations? It's through the research and the efforts of this area that we reach our decennial content. The 2020 census will enable different race and ethnic groups to self-identify their race and ethnicity. Respondents will be able to select multiple checkboxes for race and Hispanic origin, and will be able to provide additional detail using write-in fields. An expanded set of response options will enable respondents to indicate their relationship with that of the reference person, including a distinction between opposite sex and same-sex husband, wife, spouse, or unmarried partner. Our residence criteria will guide who to include on a household roster. And we have included specific instructions in our mailing materials about including young children who are historically one of our hard-to-count populations. Our coverage questions, too, include added language associated with young children and serve as reminders to include this important segment of our population. Our primary focus from a hard-to-count framework perspective for content informs design is on the hard-to-persuade and hard-to-interview segments of our framework. Language services. Language services focus primarily on the hard-to-interview segment of the hard-to-count framework. Language services in the 2020 census primarily support our self-response opportunities and will enable limited English-speaking individuals to respond to the census by providing language assistance, reducing language barriers for non-English speaking populations, and ensuring cultural relevancy and meaningful translation of 2020 census questionnaires and associated materials. Our internet self-response instrument and census questionnaire assistance will be available in 12 non-English languages. Our mailings will include instructions written in 12 non-English languages. Our enumeration instrument, field materials, and paper mailings will be available in Spanish as well as English. And we will have 59 non-English languages in video and print format, as well as language glossaries and language identification cards in the same 59 non-English languages. Research on language needs has informed a 2020 Census operational design that optimizes non-English content of questionnaires and associated non-questionnaire materials across data collection modes and operations. Field infrastructure. Often the topic of hard to count leads to questions about hiring and language skills of our field staff. The objective of our field infrastructure operation is to provide human resources and personnel management support functions, including recruiting, hiring, and onboarding that reflect the diversity of the nation to support, facilitate, and encourage response. A key viewpoint of our recruiting and hiring process is to make it local, local, local. We want enumerators who are comfortable and familiar in the neighborhoods where they work. This means we will recruit and hire at low levels of geography, and we will consider the ability to speak the languages of the local community. Our community partnership and engagement program will focus the efforts of 1,500 partnership specialists to increase self-response and participation in communities who are hesitant to respond or who won't respond. We will use existing networks, resources, and trusted voices to increase census participation in low-response communities. When considering the hard-to-count framework, the primary focus of field enumeration efforts is related to the hard-to-persuade and hard-to-interview segments. Frame. The objective of our frame efforts is to develop a high-quality geospatial frame for enumeration activities, representing all places where people live or could live. As such, our frame operations focus on the hard-to-locate segment of our hard-to-count framework. The Census Bureau is opening 248 area census offices to support the 2020 census. The estimated non-response follow-up workload, which is comprised of addresses that are hard to count, was a primary driver in determining the location and span of control for each office. We consider hard-to-count populations and operations needed to ensure coverage of those populations as we define our type of enumeration areas. The type of enumeration area represents the predominant enumeration method in a given geographic area. So we define TEAs that are focused on listing and or enumerating housing units in areas that may require special procedures or efforts to ensure accurate enumeration. For example, update enumerate, which we'll talk about in an upcoming slide. The address canvassing operation is part of a continual effort to identify all places where people live or could live, and this includes hidden housing units, which if we are unable to locate, we are unable to count the occupants. The training for our in-field address canvassing staff includes clues for the identification of hidden housing units and instructions about inquiring about additional or hidden units. The local update of census addresses provides the opportunity for tribal, state, and local governments to review and provide input on the Census Bureau's address list. This review is among other opportunities, such as the Geographic Support System Program, the Count Review Operation, and the New Construction Operation to provide input on the completeness and accuracy of our address list. The Census Bureau does not cease its efforts to maintain our address and feature database that serve as the foundation on which the 2020 Census operational design is based. Self-response. We stated earlier that our ideal path involves someone receiving their invitation letter, sitting down at a computer or picking up their mobile device, entering and submitting their 2020 census responses as the ideal path. So why are we talking about self-response in relation to hard-to-count populations? Well, there are aspects of our overall self-response design that incorporate efforts to support the enumeration of populations that might otherwise not be enumerated completely and accurately. The objective of self-response is to maximize self-response through a robust contact strategy and multiple response options. from a hard-to-count framework perspective, our primary focus is on the hard-to-interview. There are multiple components to self-response, enabling people to respond via multiple modes: internet, paper, or telephone via census questionnaire assistance, and allowing people to respond on devices such as a home computer, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. The non-ID option allows respondents to respond anytime, anywhere, without a unique identification code, providing opportunities to populations who predominantly use mobile devices and may respond while taking a bus to work or while sitting in a doctor's office when they see a census poster. The non-ID response option may also improve coverage by reaching households that were not on our frame and may not have received any mail, but saw an advertisement and were then able to respond. As mentioned earlier, we are providing online forms in multiple languages. Electronic data collection, and in particular, internet self-response, allows us to capture larger households than has been possible with the traditional paper-based data collection methodology. And the 2020 Census operational design encompasses a mail strategy tailored to demographic and geographic areas to encourage self-response. This strategy recognizes that the internet first response option is not optimal for some populations that may have the will but not the ability to respond online. As such, when areas have characteristics such as low internet connectivity or concentrations of elderly populations, providing a paper questionnaire with the first mailing provides maximum response opportunities and increases the likelihood of receiving a self-response. And because many of us need encouragement and reminders, our mailing strategy involves up to 5 mailings, combinations of letters, reminders, and for anyone who has not responded, a paper questionnaire as part of the 4th mailing. Any address that has not responded by early to mid-May will be included in our workload for non-response follow-up, which we'll discuss on an upcoming slide. Update leave. The update leave operation is designed to update the address frame and deliver questionnaires in geographic areas where the majority of housing units do not have mail delivered to the physical location of the address. Update leave is also used in areas that have experienced recent and significant changes to the housing stock, for example, as a result of a natural disaster. In the update leave operation, field staff will update our address list and hand deliver questionnaires. In many ways, update leave is an extension of a self-response area, with the major difference being that a census employee, rather than a United States postal carrier, is delivering the 2020 Census invitation to respond along with a paper questionnaire. While we hand deliver questionnaires, respondents will also have the option to respond online or over the telephone by calling Census questionnaire assistance. Update leave puts boots on the ground, similar to in-field address canvassing, to update our address list, identify missing and hidden housing units, and involves knocking on every door, and when someone is available, asking if additional housing units exist. Where we have mailable addresses, we will mail 2 reminders in an effort to increase self-response. Non-responding addresses in update leave areas will be included in our non-response follow-up operation. Hurricane Maria, which hit Puerto Rico in 2017, significantly impacted the housing stock. In response, the Census Bureau has reached a decision to conduct update leave followed by non-response follow-up in Puerto Rico. By reaching this decision, we allow additional recovery time and ensure complete coverage by delivery of questionnaires to each address in Puerto Rico. Update enumerate. The update enumerate operation is designed to update the address frame and enumerate respondents in geographically remote areas with low housing unit density, are sparsely populated, or have challenges with accessibility. Update enumerate areas include remote Alaska, select tribal areas, and remote areas of Maine. Our focus in update enumerate areas is on hiring field staff familiar with the area and with the language or other necessary skills to facilitate a response. For example, in remote Alaska, the Census Bureau will work with village elders to identify and hire enumerators who speak the local language and can translate and facilitate the collection of census response data. Our primary focus from a hard-to-count framework perspective are the hard-to-locate and hard-to-contact. Special enumerations. Special enumeration operations are designed for the enumeration of populations in special living arrangements. In some instances, we consider all of these populations hard to count. In other situations, it may be subpopulations of the target population that we consider hard to count. Examples of special enumeration populations include populations in group quarters. Group quarters are places where people live or stay in a group living arrangement that is owned or managed by an entity or organization providing housing and/or services to the residents. Group quarters have gatekeepers or administrators, which can make residents in these facilities hard to interview. Some group quarters facilities are for persons experiencing homelessness, making the populations receiving services both hard to interview and hard to contact. In particular, persons experiencing homelessness are enumerated at service-based locations such as emergency and transitional shelters, soup kitchens, regularly scheduled mobile food vans, and targeted non-sheltered outdoor locations. Additional examples of special enumerations are military enumerations, where we will receive administrative records for all military personnel and their dependents from the Defense Manpower Command Divisions under the Department of Defense. The federally affiliated Count Overseas, where we will also receive counts from military personnel and their dependents stationed overseas from Defense Manpower, as well as from federal agencies who have staff stationed overseas. And the enumeration at transitory locations, where the populations we enumerate are highly mobile and do not have a usual home elsewhere. Transitory locations include campgrounds, recreational vehicle parks, marinas, hotels and motels, racetracks, circuses, or carnivals. From a hard-to-count framework perspective, our focus is on the hard-to-contact and hard-to-interview segments. Non-response follow-up. The non-response follow-up operation is entirely about the hard-to-count. Non-response follow-up is focused on contacting and persuading residents of non-responding addresses to provide their census responses. The objective of non-response follow-up is to determine or resolve housing unit status, occupied, vacant, or non-existent, for which a self-response has not been received, and to collect census response data for housing units determined to be occupied. Administrative records, when high-quality data exist, are used in place of repeated attempts to reach non-responding housing units. This enables the Census Bureau to focus its non-response follow-up contact attempts on those housing units not represented well by high-quality administrative records, likely the harder-to-count populations. Non-response follow-up enumerator training, job aids, and frequently asked questions include information and emphasis on counting young children. Enumerator training involves a case study to provide clarity on the counting of young children, and the verbiage enumerators use during the interview will highlight the count of young children when determining the household roster. In an effort to address students living in geographic areas surrounding colleges and universities, we conduct early non-response follow-up. Early non-response follow-up focuses on college and universities, where the spring 2020 semester will conclude prior to mid-May, when non-response follow-up is scheduled to start nationwide. In these select geographic areas, we will begin non-response follow-up in early April. Enumerating non-responding housing units in these areas will increase the opportunity for students and faculty to be counted where they lived on Census Day before they may leave for the summer to return to their families, take internships elsewhere, and various other things. As enumerators are making contact attempts in communities in which they work, they may encounter language barriers to completing an interview. When a language barrier is encountered, efforts will be made to identify an enumerator who speaks the non-English language of the respondents. If an enumerator with the needed language skills cannot be identified, we will engage the services of an interpreter or translator to facilitate the interview. And if an enumerator visits a non-responding address and no one answers, the enumerator will leave a notice of visit that provides information to the household on how to respond online or over the phone, encouraging the household to self-respond. The primary focus of non-response follow-up from a hard-to-count framework perspective is the hard-to-persuade. Coverage improvement. You will not see coverage improvement listed as one of the 35 operations on the operational placemat. Coverage improvement is a component within the non-response follow-up operation. From a hard-to-count perspective, coverage improvement is unique in that we already have a response for an address. However, there is some question about the response. The objective of coverage improvement is to recontact housing units in an effort to determine if people were missed, counted in the wrong place, or counted more than once. Count discrepancies, either high or low, between the population count reported and the number of people for which data are reported will result in the identification of the case for coverage improvement. An affirmative response to either the undercount or overcount question will result in the identification of the case for coverage improvement. The goal of coverage improvement is to resolve potential coverage issues, whether that is because someone has been missed and should be included in the count, or whether someone is included and should be removed from the count because they were counted more than once or should be counted in a different location. We consider the coverage improvement cases hard to locate from a hard-to-count framework perspective, not from a missing address perspective as we do with the frame, but from the perspective of being a person and knowing where that person should be counted. In the last couple of slides, we'll talk about other considerations related to hard-to-count populations, considerations not depicted as a specific operation on our operational placemat. In a census, despite all our best efforts, unexpected events, including natural disasters, occur. When these unexpected events occur, geographic areas, populations, or both may become hard to count. How we react and how we approach the enumeration depends on the event. When an event occurs, we will form a rapid response team to assess the event and develop our recommended response to that event. In forming our response plan, we will consider timing, severity, the impacted geographic area, and other environmental concerns. Past experiences impacting our decennial census enumeration have included Hurricanes Katrina and Rita that devastated the Gulf Coast area prior to the 2020 census and necessitated a change in the planned enumeration methodology. We also experienced flooding along the Red River during the 2010 address canvassing operation that resulted in a plan to change the enumeration method. However, ultimately, the floodwaters receded and we were able to complete address canvassing as planned. And in the midst of conducting the 2010 census, the H1N1 or swine flu virus raised concern about the health and well-being of people around the country and that of our enumerators. Most recently, as mentioned earlier, the devastation resulting from Hurricane Maria has resulted in a change to the enumeration methodology in Puerto Rico for the 2020 census. And while we hope that we do not face the need to make additional adjustments to the 2020 census design as a result of natural disasters or other unexpected events, we will face those challenges head on and take the necessary steps to ensure that we can enumerate the population. The previous slides had talked about operations and activities woven throughout the design to address hard-to-count populations. Included on this slide are tools, some mentioned earlier, some not, that support enumeration of hard-to-count populations. And while not an exhaustive list, we would like to mention a few not called out earlier. The Planning Database and the Response Outreach Area Mapper, or ROAM, are tools that can be used by Census partnership specialists, local officials, and community leaders to identify hard-to-count areas. The ROAM combines low response score data with an interactive mapping platform to allow users to identify hard-to-count areas and better understand the populations of these areas for the purpose of 2020 census outreach and promotion. Identifying areas that need extra attention can help make the most of the time and resources while devising a communication and outreach strategy. All of the tools listed, and others not included, are important to the challenges we face in counting the population. So in summary, there are many influences on the environment in which we will conduct the 2020 census. The design of the 2020 census is a product of that environment. Today, our objective with this presentation was to share information about the 2020 census operational design as viewed through the lens of hard-to-count populations. Understanding how our world is evolving and the sensitivities of the world related to technology, living situations, population diversity, mobility, etc., help us understand people who have been historically hard to count and will remain hard to count, as well as people who are emerging as hard to count. It is through that understanding that we have shaped the 2020 census design. It will take an integrated 2020 census operational design woven with activities, efforts, and entire operations to ensure an accurate enumeration, counting everyone once, only once, and in the right place. And please look forward to the next release of the 2020 Census Operational Plan. Included will be a chapter or an appendix on the 2020 census in support of hard-to-count populations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Any questions? Okay, if not, why don't we take a break? I know you've been sitting for a while. Let's resume at 3 o'clock. So that's a little bit longer than our break time of 15 minutes. That's like 18, 19 minutes. So if we could be back in our seats and ready to go at 3 o'clock, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for your attention. If you could start heading back towards your seats, please. We want to resume in about 30 seconds.
Do you want me on the stage or no?
Thank you very much. As we had indicated early on, our first presentation after the break will be Dr. Simpson Garfinkel, Senior Computer Specialist for Confidentiality and Data Access in our Research and Methodology Directorate, will talk to us about 2020 Census Disclosure Avoidance. So I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Garfinkel.
Thank you very much. Hi, I am Simpson Garfinkel, the Senior Computer Scientist for Confidentiality and Data Access. I am giving this talk on the 2020 Disclosure Avoidance System on behalf of myself and John Aboud, the Chief Scientist and the Associate Director for Research and Methodology. The Disclosure Avoidance System assures that the 2020 Census data products meet the legal requirements of Title 13, Section 9 of the U.S. Code. The DAS protects the results of the census so that data from individuals cannot be identified. That is, the DAS is designed to prevent improper disclosures of data about individuals in the 2020 Census data products. Some group quarters facilities will be protected using the principles that we apply to employer business establishments. Our stakeholders are all users of data from the 2020 Census. The 2020 Census takes a fundamentally different approach to disclosure avoidance than previous censuses. In this talk, I will start by discussing the project purpose, why we need to create a new approach to disclosure avoidance for the 2020 Census, and not simply repeat what we did for the censuses in 2000 and 2010. Next, I'll be discussing the use of noise injection and differential privacy, which is the technique that we are using to assure confidentiality for 2020 Census respondents. As you'll hear, differential privacy is a mathematical approach to protecting privacy that was invented in 2006 and is now widely used in the technology industry, including at Microsoft, where it was invented, Google, and Apple. It has also been used by the Census Bureau since 2008 to protect the popular On the Map application used by the Federal Emergency Management Agency during hurricanes and other disasters. I will then discuss the state of the project. As you can tell, our traffic light is green. Finally, I'll discuss the outlook for 2020 and conclude. So, next slide. Okay. To understand why we need a new disclosure avoidance system, we need to understand two key ideas: database reconstruction and household swapping. Okay, so we're on slide 64, which has an overly simplified diagram of how we make statistics for the 2020 census. So we will collect data from the residents of the United States, and we will process it, and we will then publish it on the census website. The individual, household, and group quarters data that we collect is confidential, protected by law. And the summary data that we publish is public. So database reconstruction is a mathematical process that reverses this process. Database reconstruction finds data that produces the same published statistics. A database reconstruction might find the same raw data as illustrated here, or a database reconstruction might find a completely different data set that produces the same statistics. So for example, consider the statistics that we might publish for a single census block. Here, we say that the block has 4 people under 18 and 6 people over 18. It has 4 people of race 1, 4 people of race 2, and 4 people of race 3. So these published data might be the result of having 2 children and 2 adults of race 1, 2 children and 2 adults of race 2, and 2 adults of race 3. Alternatively, there might be 4 children of race 1, 4 adults of race 2, and 2 adults of race 3. In this example, each person has 2 numbers that were used for tabulation: the person's race and their age. So for the 10 people on this fictitious block, the Census Bureau would have collected 20 pieces of data, 10 races and 10 ages. Those 10 races and 10 ages make up the 20 values in the confidential database for this fictitious census block. Now let's look back at the published data. The published data contains 5 statistics. It turns out that with 10 people, there are 1,024 possible combinations of each person being under 18 or over 18. And 210 of those combinations have 4 people under 18 and 6 people over. Likewise, there are 59,049 possible combinations of 3 exclusive races, and 3,150 have 4 people of race 1, 4 people of race 2, and 2 people of race 3. Because in this example there is no two-way or crossed relationship between the 2 sets of statistics, there are 210 times 3,150, or 661,500 possible combinations of confidential values that produce these published statistics. That's because the number of confidential values here is so much larger than the number of published statistics. So while database reconstruction is possible, there are more than 500,000 possible databases that you can reconstruct. Now let's talk about the 2010 census. The 2010 census asked 10 questions and collected 6 pieces of information used in tabulation for each person: address, coded to the census tabulation block; sex, age, race, ethnicity, and relationship to person 1. In the 2010 census of population of housing, we counted 388,745,538 people. If you consider the 6 pieces of information per person that was used to compute the published statistics, that comes to roughly 1.9 billion pieces of information. For the 2010 census publication schedule, we published roughly 2.8 billion statistics for the PL 94-171 redistricting data, including the zeros. We published another 2.8 billion statistics for the rest of SF1, another 2 billion in SF2. We published 30 million in a public use microdata sample. The total is roughly 7.7 billion statistics, or 25 per person. That's a lot more than 6 per person. Basically, you can write 7.7 billion equations with 1.5 billion unknowns and solve. This is very different from the hypothetical example that I showed on the previous slides. This is real. So there were actually two privacy protection mechanisms for the 2010 census. The first was aggregation. We published aggregate statistics in the PL94, SF1, and SF2 files. As I've shown you, those statistics are susceptible to database reconstruction, provided that you have a computer that is large enough and fast enough to crunch the numbers. In 2010, this was not a realistic threat, but today it is. The 2000 and 2010 censuses had a second privacy protection mechanism as well. And that second mechanism was household-level swapping. We don't talk much about the actual mechanism of swapping. The official documentation for the PL94-171, SF1, and SF2 publications all contain the same paragraph, from which I quote. Data swapping is a method of disclosure avoidance designed to protect the confidentiality in tables of frequency data, the number or percentage of the population with certain characteristics. Data swapping is done by editing the source data or exchanging records for a sample of cases. A sample of households is selected and matched on a set of selected key variables with households in neighboring geographic areas with a small population, that have similar characteristics, same number of adults, same number of children, etc. Because the swap often occurs within a geographic area with a small population, there is no effect on the marginal totals for the geographic area with a small population or for totals that include data from multiple geographic areas with small populations. Because of data swapping, users should not assume that tables with cells having a value of 1 or 2 reveal information about specific individuals. The advantage of swapping are that it's easy to understand, it does not affect state counts, since swaps were always within a state, swapping can be run state by state, and the operation is invisible to the rest of census processing. The disadvantage of swapping includes it does not protect against the database reconstruction attack. The swap rate and details of the swapping algorithm must remain confidential. And the privacy guarantee of swapping, and of aggregation, it turns out, is based on the lack of external data. Now I'm going to talk briefly about noise injection and differential privacy. So on slide 86, as I mentioned earlier, the risk of database reconstruction has been understood for decades. However, in 2003, two mathematicians, Irit Dunar and Kobi Nissim, showed that it is far harder to protect a statistical database than had previously been thought. Dunar and Nissim showed that the only safe way to protect a database was by adding noise to the published statistics. Adding noise doesn't make database reconstruction impossible. Instead, it makes it so that there's no way to tell if the reconstructed database is correct or not. But how much noise should be added? Clearly, if you add a little bit of noise, the results are still fairly accurate, but so is the reconstructed database. Slide 88. Of course, you could add a lot of noise, which would result in more privacy and less accuracy. Essentially, as you add more noise, you increase the number of possible reconstructions. So this is because performing the reconstruction on noisy publications requires considering all of the possible databases that might have produced the noisy publications. The more noise, the more possibilities there are. In slide 90, you'll see that differential privacy gives us a tool for controlling the trade-off between noise and accuracy. Differential privacy creates a mathematical relationship between the amount of noise added, the resulting privacy loss, and the resulting accuracy. The less noise that is added, the higher the accuracy, but the larger the privacy loss. The more noise that's added, the lower the accuracy, but the amount of privacy loss is also lower. So data swapping has the same property, but for any given level of privacy loss, swapping is less accurate. In 2017, the Census Bureau announced that it would use differential privacy for the 2020 census. Differential privacy provides mathematically provable bounds on the maximum privacy loss. It also provides algorithms that allow policymakers to manage the trade-off between accuracy and privacy loss. At the Census Bureau, we refer to the privacy loss budget, which is the amount of privacy loss that is associated with a given data release. The final privacy loss budget for the 2020 census will be determined by the Census Bureau's Data Stewardship Executive Policy Committee with recommendations from the Disclosure Review Board. So thanks for sticking with this. I'm now going to give a talk about the state of the 2020 disclosure avoidance system. As you can see, I've put up a green traffic light. So when we started this project in 2017, there was no off-the-shelf system for applying differential privacy to a national census. We've been creating a modern disclosure avoidance system that drops into the census data processing pipeline. Ours will be the first such implementation in the world. The pipeline starts with the collection of data from respondents using the Internet Self-Response Instrument, the telephone self-response system, the paper census form, and census enumerators. That information is used to create the decennial response file. From there, the primary selection algorithm creates the census unedited file. Through the process of editing and imputation, we create the census edited file. The census edited file is the input to the disclosure avoidance system. The DAS takes the census edited file, adds noise consistent with our privacy loss budget, which we call epsilon, and produces the microdata detail file. The MDF is used to create the pre-specified tabular summaries, such as the redistricting file, the balance of SF1, and the SF2. The MDF will also be used to enable special tabulations and post-census research. There are many advantages to differential privacy compared to swapping. The first and most important is that the privacy guarantees are provable and tunable. Census leadership can control the privacy loss to balance the accuracy and privacy requirements, and we can mathematically prove that the amount of noise we are adding and the way in which we are adding it are sufficient to accomplish our goals. Our privacy guarantees are future-proof. The privacy mechanism is protected against new data releases and new mathematical discoveries. Unlike swapping, the privacy guarantees of differential privacy are public and explainable. And as I indicated before, the mechanism protects against database reconstruction. Unfortunately, there are some disadvantages. The first is that the entire country must be processed at once for best accuracy. This represents a different way of processing the decennial census than has been done in the past. Second, every use of the private data must be tallied in the privacy loss budget. That's because every use of private data could be used in database reconstruction. So as a scientist, one of the things that I'm most thrilled about is that we will be able to make the source code of the DAS open to public inspection. We will be publishing the source code of the DAS on the internet, and we have created a data set from the 1940 census data that can be used for testing. We will be inviting the scientific community to download the DAS, try it out, and give us suggestions for improving it. So on slide 96, you will see a summary of actual runs of the 2020 DAS as implemented in the 2018 end-to-end census test, but using public microdata from the 1940 census. The graphs compare runs of the 2020 DAS with different algorithms, 2 different algorithms. On the top, the black line is our, on the bottom, the black line is our original algorithm, which provided privacy protection block by block. As you can see, the accuracy for the block by block system ranged from less than 0.85 to roughly 0.97 for privacy loss budgets between 0.25 and 2.00. Now on the top, the blue line shows our top-down algorithm. This algorithm has been designed to produce better accuracy at geographies with larger populations. So for statistics at the national and state levels, it produces highly accurate results. For statistics at the county level, it still produces excellent accuracy. Our 1940 data is organized according to enumeration district, not by census tract. You will see that even at the enumeration district level, our top-down algorithm is still more accurate than the block-by-block algorithm. Over the next year, we hope we will make it more accurate still for any given privacy loss budget. We've had a lot of challenges in developing differential privacy for the Census Bureau. Differential privacy is not widely known or understood outside of academia, so we are engaged in a significant outreach effort. Second, most data users, including most internal Census Bureau data users, expect the same level of accuracy regardless of the level of detail. For example, they expect that statistics per census tract will have the same accuracy as statistics for a state. This was not the case in 2000 and in 2010 because of swapping, but we did not do a very good job of making that clear to our data users. Indeed, in 2000 and 2010, we did not disclose the swap rate, and we did not quantify the error rate that swapping introduced. There are really 2 DAS projects. The first is what I call the engineering project, and the second is the science project. The engineering project is to build a turnkey, batch-oriented system that will run without an operator and perform the disclosure avoidance for a national census. This is a production system that must run within the 2018 end-to-end census test and the 2020 census production environments. It is resource intensive, but it uses those resources only when it is actually running. They are released when it is not in use. It's based on Amazon's elastic MapReduce technology. The DAS system will read the census edited file from the census data lake. It will process the CEF using the DAS top-down algorithms and a commercial optimizer. It will create the microdata detail file. It will then save the results in the census data lake. We are saying that the status for this project is green. We have a working system, and we use it to produce those graphs that I showed you earlier. The second half of building the DAS is to improve the differential privacy algorithms that we are using. This allows the published data to have more accuracy for the same privacy loss budget. The good news is that we are now using algorithms that are significantly more accurate than the algorithms that we started with last year. These algorithms are also considerably more accurate than those used by the commercial vendors who are also using differential privacy. Continued progress requires that we retain interactive access to the microdata from the 2010 census, and continued access to high-performance computing on demand. Looking forward, the disclosure avoidance system for the 2020 census is a good news story. We have a functioning disclosure avoidance system. The current top-down algorithm handles the PL 94-171 queries for the end-to-end test and generates microdata for tabulation. We're sharing the resulting tables with subject matter experts and discussing possible improvements. We will soon be integrating the high-dimensional matrix mechanism from our academic partners, which will improve accuracy on requested tabulations without increasing the privacy loss budget. And we are collecting the census, and we are now collecting use cases to help us understand what data products our data users need and at what levels of accuracy. So this is really important. This past July, we published a notice in the Federal Register soliciting feedback from users of the 2020 census data products. We asked many detailed questions about specifically which tabulations are required and at which levels of accuracy. We got back more than 100 responses. However, we want to make sure that everybody who wants to use these data is able to send us their requirements, so we've reopened the FRN and are taking comments until November 8th, 2018. Before I conclude, I do want to share two issues that we are currently working to address. First, the current DAS does not handle household queries or person-household joins, although we have in-progress research for both. So a household query is a query such as, how many households are headed by a person between the ages of 20 and 30? The current disclosure avoidance system does not generate microdata for such a query because there are no household queries that are part of the 2018 end-to-end test. The second kind of query that we don't handle are person-household joins, such as how many children are in households headed by someone aged 20 to 30. We can handle person-level queries, though, such as how many children live there and how many people are aged 20 to 30. We haven't done these queries yet due to the lack of scientific and engineering personnel. And that really is our second problem, the lack of scientists and engineers who are trained in differential privacy. To address this, we are reaching out to many schools and universities, and we currently have 2 cooperative agreements in place with some of the inventors of differential privacy. In conclusion, we are using differential privacy to assure that published statistics do not violate the Census Bureau's Title 13 obligations. This is a huge step forward for the Census Bureau. We have a working system, and we will use it for the 2018 end-to-end test. There's a lot of scientific work that remains to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simpson. Any questions for Simpson on differential privacy? Ty.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to the Bureau for this public window on this fascinating, I mean, I'm wearing my Census geek hat here, and this is just, this is great. Just to verify that differential applies, if my understanding from your slides, is that the different levels of aggregation. Is that generalizable, why the word differential shows up in the term of art?
So thank you for that question. The term differential privacy actually refers to the underlying privacy model. The model that was developed in 2006 is that the statistics resulting from a collection of people should not change very much if any one person is removed. So it's the difference between the statistics when you opt in and when you opt out. And you get slightly different statistics if any person opts in or opts out. So differential privacy assumes that any person might opt in or opt out. And it computes the change that would result in the statistics. And then noise is added that's calibrated to that change. And so the idea is everybody's statistics everybody's personal data is protected because they could deny that they were in that sample or not in that sample.
Got it.
It's an unfortunate term because it can be misinterpreted.
That was my next point, is I invite a way to talk about it without that label, because differential privacy sounds
I think we always talk about differential undercount at the census,
Right.
and it's not the same
at
thing,
all
right.
the same kind of dimension of, yeah, right, fair enough. Thank you.
So this is a good differential.
Thank you.
Hi, Devin Braun with GAO. Just a quick question. Are there any plans to use this or test it on the American Community Survey?
Thank you for that question. So the American Community Survey is a much more complicated survey than the decennial census. Despite its complexity in terms of the data product, the decennial census is one of the simplest products that we produce here at the Census Bureau. We have a project to make the ACS formally private, which is the blanket term that we use for all privacy mechanisms which have a strong theoretical basis. That is ongoing, and I'm sure we will be reporting on that in the future.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you very much, Simpson. We now will move over to Timothy Kennel from the Decennial Statistical Studies Division to talk with us about the 2020 Post-Enumeration Survey.
Thank you. I'm honored to share with some of you some of our plans for the most interesting survey in the world, the 2020 Post-Enumeration Survey. The goals of the 2020 Post-Enumeration Survey are the same as the goals of the 2010 Census Coverage Measurement Survey, or CCM. We plan to measure the coverage of the people and housing units in the decennial census. We measure net coverage by comparing the census counts to the true population size. If the census count is lower than the true population size, we say the census undercounted the population. If the census has more than the true population count as a result of duplicates or erroneous enumerations, we say the census overcounted the population. As in 2010, we plan to measure the amount of undercoverage or overcoverage in the decennial census. We also plan to partition the census count into 3 categories: correct enumerations, erroneous enumerations, and whole person imputations. We will also produce a 4th component of coverage called omissions, which we define as the difference between the number of correct enumerations in the census and the true population size. The results of the post-enumeration survey help us to understand the extent to which the census counted everyone once, only once, and in the right place. In addition to evaluating the census, results of the post-enumeration survey are also used to improve future censuses. Coverage estimates by various census operational outcomes can identify operations that could be improved, as well as suggest new operations to reduce census errors. The Census Bureau uses 2 methods to measure the completeness of the census. The first method, called demographic analysis, uses administrative records, such as birth records and death records, and also uses migration statistics to form an independent estimate of the United States population. Census counts are compared to these estimates at the national level for broad demographic characteristics. The second method is the topic of this presentation, the post-enumeration survey. It uses both the census results and independent survey results to estimate the true population size. One of the many amazing things about the post-enumeration survey is that it takes 2 surveys, neither of which is assumed to be perfect, and uses them to estimate the population size. The Census Bureau has conducted a post-enumeration survey for over 30 years. Here we see some findings from past post-enumeration surveys. For each year from 1990 to 2010, we see the census count, the estimated net undercoverage, and the undercount rate. For those of you who have the census counts memorized, the census counts here do not include people living in group quarters and people living in remote Alaska. Also, the census counts have been rounded. In 1990, the census count was about 248.7 million people. We estimate that the 1990 census undercounted the true population by about 4 million people. In 2000, the census count was 273.6 million. This was an overcount of 1.3 million people. A negative undercount means that the census counts exceeded the actual population size. Duplicates and out-of-scope enumerations contributed to the overall overcount in 2000. In 2010, the net undercount was not statistically different from zero. The post-enumeration survey uses a method called capture-recapture, or dual system estimation, to determine the size of the population. Because dual system estimation is so interesting and central to the post-enumeration survey methodology, I'd like to take a few moments to walk you through how it works. I'll first describe the capture-recapture method as it is commonly used to determine the size of animal populations. Then I'll discuss how the method is used to measure the coverage of the census. The capture-recapture method was first used in the 1800s to determine the number of fish in a pond or lake. Biologists catch a net full of fish in a representative sample of areas around the pond. This catch is called the capture. After marking the fish that were caught, the biologists release the fish back into the pond. And after giving the fish time to swim around and get mixed up, the biologists then put the net back into the pond in their sample areas. The second catch is called the recapture. The biologists count the number of fish in the recapture and the total fish in the recapture that had been marked from the first catch. With these counts, the biologists create a table like the one shown here and use statistics to determine the total fish in the pond. The capture-recapture method has been extended to estimate the size of human populations. For the 2020 post-enumeration survey, the capture is the census, and the recapture is an independent enumeration called the PES sample, the population sample, or the P sample for short. First, we select a sample of blocks. We form a table like the one shown here for each sample area. Everybody in our sample block fits into one of these 4 boxes. The first row shows the people who are enumerated or counted in the census. The bottom row shows the people who were not counted in the census. The post-enumeration survey is like the recapture, where we do a separate independent enumeration of our sample areas from scratch. The first column shows the people who are counted in the PES, and the second column shows the people in the sample who are not counted in the PES. Note that the count in the lower right cell is unknown, so we have to estimate it. After we match the people in the post-enumeration survey to the census, we can put everyone in the census and the PES into one of the green or purple boxes in this table. Within our sample areas, most people are enumerated in the census and the PES, that happy green box. Of course, some people are enumerated by just the census or the PES, but not both. The people enumerated in just one system are shown in purple. Lastly, we miss some people from the census and the PES. These people are in the red cell in the lower right. The cell is usually very small because the census and the PES usually count most of the people and housing units in the sample areas. This fact helps us achieve precise coverage estimates. Under an assumption of independence between the census and the PES, we use basic statistics and algebra to determine the number of people in that red cell. Adding the people across these 4 cells for each of the PES sample blocks and then weighting them up gives us an estimate of the population size. Now, I'm very happy to report that we've been planning for the 2020 post-enumeration survey for almost 2 years. We have a lot of work to do, but we are making progress every day. One of the major decisions to date has been to use the existing field infrastructure of the current household surveys to conduct the post-enumeration survey field operations. This decision has saved us from having to build new systems or modify old systems from the 2010 CCM. Every day, the Census Bureau is collecting survey data for surveys, such as the Current Population Survey, the American Community Survey, the National Crime Victimization Survey, the American Housing Survey, and many, many other well-established surveys. The post-enumeration survey is being integrated into this list of surveys. An additional benefit of working with the current household surveys to conduct the field data collection for the PES is that we're able to preserve organizational independence between the census enumerations and the PES enumerations. In an effort to mitigate risks associated with design changes and to keep measurement properties of the coverage estimates invariant over time, the design of the 2020 PES is very similar to the 2010 CCM. We're also relying on the solid design and methods from the 2010 CCM because of budget limitations during the decade. Current plans are to provide coverage estimates for people and housing units by similar characteristics as reported in the 2010 CCM. As a note, group quarters, people living in group quarters, and remote Alaska are out of scope. As we did in 2010, we plan to conduct a complete and separate PES in Puerto Rico. In 2010, the CCM reported components of coverage for the first time. We plan to continue the tradition of partitioning the census into correct enumerations, erroneous enumerations, and whole person enumerations by demographic characteristics and operational outcomes. Here we see a high-level flowchart for the post-enumeration survey. There are 3 phases to the PES: an initial housing unit phase represented by the first column, a person phase represented by the second column, and a final housing unit phase represented by the third column. The pink boxes are sampling and estimation activities. The yellow boxes are field operations, and the blue boxes are matching operations. Starting with the pink box in the upper left, about 10,500 blocks are sampled. Similar to the 2010 CCM, a stratified systematic sample with an oversample of renters and large blocks will be selected. Then, field representatives will list all housing units from scratch in each sample block using an automated listing and mapping instrument. In the third box, the PES listings from the independent listing operation will be matched to the list of census housing units from address canvassing. Over the course of the census, housing units could be added or deleted from the address canvassing list. Thus, we perform another phase of housing unit matching after the final census list is complete. We perform the initial housing unit matching in the third box because we want to start our person interview operations before too many people move out of their census address and too many people forget where they were living on census day. After the initial housing unit matching in the third box, we go back to the field to collect additional information on housing units that we couldn't assign a match or status code for. At the end of the first phase, we should have an initial list of housing units from the census, a list of housing units listed from the PES, and a match code assigned to all census and PES units that matched. One important thing to note is that we don't have a list of people in the sample blocks. Thus, we move to the second column, the person operations. In box 5, we subsample large blocks. This subsampling results in a more heterogeneous sample, which increases the precision of our estimates. After subsampling, we move to the second yellow box in the second column, the person interview. In this operation, field representatives use an automated instrument to interview all sample PES households to create a roster of people living in the household. We then wait for the final list of census people and match the PES list of people to the census list of people in the same blocks. We perform a person follow-up to help get information that could resolve the match status for people that could not be matched. The final pink box is in the second column is where we produce coverage estimates for people. This involves imputation, weighting, modeling, estimation, and tabulation. In the third column, we refresh the initial census housing unit list with the final census housing unit list. The changes are given a chance to be matched to the PES independent listing. Then a paper follow-up operation seeks to resolve the units with uncertain match and enumeration status. Lastly, the housing unit data is processed and estimates are produced. Although there are dozens of systems supporting the PES, there are 4 core systems that are not used by other decennial operations. These systems are the demographic survey system, the PES clerical matching and map update system, the PES processing and control system, and the PES imputation and estimation system. The demographic survey system is a collection of legacy systems used to support field operations. Some modifications to the legacy systems are being made, but the general principle is to use the demographic survey systems with minimal changes. Because the Demographic Directorate has a wealth of experience developing systems to select area samples for household surveys, the DSS will be selecting the PES block sample, and that'll start next year. All clerical matching operations will use the PES clerical matching and map update system to manually match addresses, match people, geocode addresses, and assign resident status codes. This system will display person and address information as well as maps from both the census and the independent PES enumerations. The PES processing and control system will perform sundry activities including subsampling, computer matching, and data processing. As its name implies, the PES imputation and estimation system will be imputing PES match and status variables and creating estimation files. In general, the estimation methods used for the CCM will not be changed for the 2020 PES. So we will impute and weight the data similarly to the 2010 CCM. Likewise, we will produce synthetic estimates of coverage using logistic regression models and direct estimates for components of coverage. The tabulation system, which the American Community Survey and 2020 Census will be using, will tabulate the coverage tables. Our target final sample size of 180,000 housing units in the 50 states and DC is similar to the 2010 CCM sample size. This sample will be spread out over about 10,050 blocks. We anticipate listing over 500,000 housing units in these blocks to get our final target sample size of 180,000 housing units. We end up listing more than twice the number of housing units in our final sample. Because neighborhoods tend to be homogeneous, it's better for us to conduct the PES in a larger number of neighborhoods and then subsample than it is to conduct the PES in all housing units in a smaller number of blocks. I am very happy to announce that our plans are to publish the main set of national person reports at the end of June 2021. That's about 15 months after Census Day. In 2010, the analogous reports were published in May of 2012, about 25 months after Census Day. Our hope is that providing coverage reports earlier will provide a more salient and timely evaluation of the 2020 census and better inform the early plans for the 2030 census. Although our plan is to publish the housing units and state estimates at the end of the 2020 fiscal year, those reports will be released 18 months after Census Day, which is 7 months earlier than the 2010 schedule. So that's my overview of the 2020 post-enumeration survey.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions on our post-enumeration survey? Ty?
Yeah, thank you for the details. I like that stuff too. I'm glad to see that the four components of the coverage are still all on the table, because I mean the net cancels out, and the ones that are under and the ones that are over aren't typically the same people, and at the local levels it's pretty variant. I mean, do you remember the numbers for 2010? I mean, the overcount, the undercount, when they canceled out into different components? The emissions, the EE?
We had net
Net was
count
small.
that was not statistically different
Right.
from zero.
Yeah.
And there, I don't remember the number.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 3 million or something.
Yep, Ty, we had approximately 10 million erroneous enumerations, and we had approximately 10 million people that we estimated we missed in the in the 2010 CCM.
Right. Yeah, so it's good that you get the details on that, because the other, I did a question. Struck by the slide you have on the infographic you have out in the hallway, and I think it's one of the slides you had here, on the the internet response rate, the internet self-response rate. It's immense. It's great, and I think it sounds like that's kind of the future. I know there used to be an awful lot of research on mode effects, the correlation bias and stuff. Do you know, is that stuff current? Are people still looking at mode effects and correlation bias? I'm just curious if there's an intersection between a shift towards a lot of self-response on the internet and kind of the correlation bias, which I think you found in the last census probably wasn't a big deal. I don't know. Is that an area of research that you guys see out there?
Pat, do you want to address that?
Sure, Ty. In 2010, we took the census enumerations and split them up. And back then, we didn't have internet or telephone, but we did look at them, for instance, by how someone responded, either self-response, in the NERFU with a household respondent, or in the NERFU with a proxy respondent. This time, we plan to do the similar thing, analogous thing, but also add an internet and mail versus mail plus the non-response follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then I'm going to turn it over to Michael Thiem, who is the Assistant Director of the Sales Census Programs. And Michael will give us our wrap-up and closing comments.
All right. I often, when I do this, I think that we all came here to have a conversation with Ty, which makes me feel comfortable, because you know, we know what to expect, and we can sort of shrink the size of the room and feel like we're all just having a nice conversation. What I took from, what I wanted to reiterate from today's presentation is essentially four things. We have, I think what we've found is that we've done a 2018 end-to-end test that was a success. It did what it was supposed to do. It showed us that the systems work, and it showed us that our design could actually translate to the 2020 census. There's more work to do, but that was a huge success for us. The second thing is that we wanted to continue to get across our posture for systems readiness and cybersecurity. This is something that is chief in my mind all the time. I feel like this is the thing that when people ask what keeps us up, this is the thing that keeps a lot of, especially us systems people, up at night. But again, I feel like we have a good team. We have some of the best people in the country, and we have a bunch of partnerships, including our three-letter agencies that are helping us work this through. The third thing, and I think sort of an underlying piece of a lot of what we were talking about, was partnerships. We're just sort of getting started on the partnerships focus, but so many of the things like the hard-to-count discussion depends in a very large way on partnerships. And so that's another thing I want to sort of plant in the participants that come to this, that partnerships is one of our next frontiers and the thing that we're going to be really working on to make the 2020 work. And then the final thing is our commitment to a scientifically modern, accurate, and secure census. I think that the Census Bureau has been a place in the past, and it has a rich history of scientific and computer and innovation excellence, and we're getting people like Simpson Garfinkel and Tim Kennel and Marianne, people that continue that tradition and keep us actually close, if not on, close to the cutting edge. So, pieces from Autry. One of the things I wanted to repeat that Autry had said is that our systems performed their roles and no data were compromised in the 2018 test. Despite a highly unfriendly cyber environment, we had thousands of attacks a day hit the Census Bureau that we were able to hold off. The recent tabletop exercise with the Department of Homeland Security brings partners in and lets us actually share things that allow them to help us do what we need to do to get through this. In terms of partnerships, we talked about complete count committees, community partnership and engagement program, and the national partnership program. And all, as I said, all of those things support the hard to count issues that we have. We went to Marianne, who talked about hard to count, and to me, Marianne's discussion exemplifies the complexity of the Census Bureau. Now, you think, I tell my friends, people that don't know exactly what we do at the Census Bureau, they think you just count people. But all of the things that Marianne described to you actually demonstrate the complexity of what we do. And the reason for that complexity is because we care about every section of society and that it has to be represented and counted. It also it shows me how interesting our work is here. There are people that we try to attract. I mean, it's hard to actually get people to come work at the Census Bureau unless they know about it. So if you can come to work every day and your job is to make sure young children are counted, or that when there's a disaster, we know how to count those people. There are just some fascinating problems that we deal with here at the Census Bureau, and it's interesting and meaningful work. We'll go to Simpson. With better technology and data proliferation in our society, we need a new way to protect against data disclosure. Simpson Garfinkel, who has one of my favorite names in the Census Bureau, because when I first met him, and I heard his name, I couldn't not hear Bridge Over Troubled Water or The Sound of Silence. And I'm sure I'm the first person that's ever said anything like that to you, Simpson, right? But he brings this cutting-edge computer and data science to the Census team, and again, following this long-held Census tradition. And Tim Kennel, again, shows our commitment to transparency and to the truth. This is our 4th PES. We're going to actually release our results from this PES earlier than we ever have before. And I think this is, again, demonstrates our moving forward and our commitment to truth and transparency. Finally, I just want to say that our January PMR is coming up. I don't think we know the exact date yet, but our topics for the next PMR are the Census Barriers, Attitudes, and Motivators Survey. I think a lot of people have heard about that for many months, and we're going to demonstrate the results of that. And we're going to actually unveil our final operational plan before the 2020 census, and then I'm sure there will be other updates. But hopefully everybody has a nice fall weekend, and thank you for coming. And I don't know if Al will probably say something
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your attention as we held you up on a Friday afternoon. We're letting you go a little early this afternoon, and I'm sure nobody's going to resist, but if you want to stick around, you're welcome to stick around with us. But thank you very much. We will keep you updated in terms of the full agenda and timing on the January PMR shortly. Have a great weekend.